Hello, Molly here. I just thought I would pop in and do a couple of videos to kind of warm up for Wednesday. I'm a little bit nervous about doing a live event, so here's some practice. This is Gizmo. And this is one of my ornaments that I've been making this year, and I thought it would be fun to show you guys what goes into making one of these. The first thing I do is make a print. So each of these is my original artwork, and I take that work, I photograph it and all that good stuff, and make a print. And then I cut them out into perfect circles. I'm not a magician at this, so I actually use one of these little guys. This is the first time I've actually used one, and oh my gosh, it's fantastic. Totally love. So if you don't already have one and you're trying to cut a perfect circle, this one's fantastic. This one actually is adjustable. So anyway, I cut them out, and then they're going to be eventually glued onto a blank ornament. So you can do whatever you want with one of these. This one in particular needed to be drilled. I needed a hole in there so that it actually has a place for the ribbon to go. And then you can paint them any color that you want. In this case, all of my ornaments, I wanted them to be uniform, so I painted them all black. So then you have a nice drilled version with the black. And the nice thing is that you do have a little bit of wood grain, and so that kind of, it helps. Sorry, I have some lint and dust here, but it does kind of give it a little bit more visual interest, especially on the back where it's not going to be terribly interesting. I have done a couple of these double-sided, which honestly is a lot more work because you have to wait for everything to dry. But anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. So I take my blank now, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue that on there. This isn't such a complicated process. Obviously, you've glued things before. I do like to use wax paper to press them down, and then I'll set them under a book for a while, at least an hour or so, just to make sure that they're good and stuck, because you don't want them to come up. Once that's done, then I'll use one layer of this, one or two sometimes. Mod Podge is great because this is going to create a seal around the outside. And it also, it seems like we did this with and without the Mod Podge, and we discovered that it does allow you to use a little bit less epoxy once it comes to that point. But also it really makes the epoxy a little bit more fluid, a little bit easier to flow. And yet not flow too much. So anyway, I'll explain that in a second. So that's what we do. A layer or two of this. If we're doing double-sided, that means flipping it over, putting another coat on here, letting it dry in between, a lot of dry time, a lot of patience. So once I have that, then it's the fun part. We get to do the epoxy. And when I say fun part, I mean like the terrifying, oh my gosh, anything could go wrong. So you definitely want to put down plastic wherever you're working. Plastic allows to preserve your surface, even though mine's well worn. But also, the epoxy doesn't stick to this, so it allows you to be able to, even if it were to run off, it won't glue your ornament to your surface. You'll still be able to pick it back up off the plastic, which is important because if it did accidentally, the epoxy ran off the side, it would glue it to this, and then you would have a real mess. So plastic is important. All right. The epoxy itself is a two-part. We have a hardener, and then I guess the actual glue part or the solvent part. Now, because this is two-part, you really do need to mix it really well. So the best way we've found is to use plastic cups. You're going to need at least 3 of these little guys. One for each part. So you're going to pour in as much as you want, keeping in mind that you're going to be doubling this because they're going to be put together. And I would go ahead and figure out how much you want to use. I'll use a measuring cup and water, and I'll mark it. And then I'll use the same liquid poured in there just to make sure that they're exactly even before I ever start putting them. Because if they are not even and they're not perfectly balanced, well, bad things can happen. It may not glue as much. It may kind of separate. You may get more bubbling, all kinds of things. So once you pour them in here, then you'll take your third cup, and you're actually going to take these two and pour them into that. And then that way you have a perfectly balanced, even mix. You're going to take a skewer or whatever you have on hand. I love these guys because the double-sided. You're going to stir this for a good 2 to 3 minutes solid, just very consistently. That's going to make sure you have a really good mixture. They're mixed really well, but also it kind of gets works some of the bubbles and the kinks out, and it also allows it to, the heat kind of works its way through there, and it really kind of makes it a little bit more of the consistency that you want to work with. So that's also important. So once you've got that, you're going to take your surface here, and you're going to pour a little bit on, just maybe about, start off with a nickel or a dime's worth on the middle, and then you're going to start pushing and pulling it to all the way covering the surface. Okay, and then what you're going to do from there is take, again, as much as you pulled, and go all the way up to the edge, but not over. This is in particular called a dome epoxy surface. So you might be able to see that there's this lovely like little ridge. So there's actually like a small little dome on top of this. That's what we want. The other option that you have is a flow epoxy, where it actually flows all the way off, so your edges and stuff would be covered. I don't recommend that for this one, but if you were going to do that, you'd want to use masking tape, or some people use Vaseline, all kinds of things, just so that you don't get epoxy on the back side. And then you would also probably put it on a stand just so it doesn't have any problems. But for this one, we don't want it to pour over to the sides. So you're going to go all the way up to the edge, just very, very carefully working the epoxy to the lip of the ornament without going over. Once you've got that, then the fun part starts. And that's when you get the heat out, because you're going to have bubbles. And you may find like little micro hairs and things. So there's a couple different kinds of things you can use. This is a butane torch. I think creme brulee, kind of like for a kitchen maybe. When we first started doing this, I didn't have a whole lot of options, so I was using this big guy. He works just as fine. The two things I don't recommend is like a hair dryer or even a heat gun, because they do tend to blow the air around. And for this dome, for this dome one, blowing them could just push your epoxy right over the edge, and that's what we were trying to avoid. I've never really seen anybody do it, but you could try it with a lighter. I don't know that you're going to get the good results. Anyway, once you've got that, you're going to let this set about an hour, and then I would check it again just for bubbles, just to make sure. You may have to pop them. You may have to pull a hair off. You may have to use your torch again. It is really important not to overheat your epoxy. We discovered that if we do that, it causes some discoloration of the print underneath, which is not good. So anyway, then this is going to set on the counter or wherever you're doing it for at least a day, at least overnight. I wouldn't even ship these until at least 2 days later. If they're double-sided, you're doing all of that again, waiting another couple of days, and then being able to ship them. So you want to be very careful not to mar the surface. You know, they do harden up pretty well overnight, but again, it's important to kind of keep that in control. Now, the last thing is just to add a little ribbon or whatever kind of details you want. And I'll eventually sign the back of this little guy and ship him on his way. I hope you enjoyed my video. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thanks.